Thank you, thank you. Is my mic on? It is on. Hi, GDA. How are you? That was a bit, subdued. Let's try it again. Hi, GDA. How are you? Much better. That, I think, is an example of maybe, you getting a little bit out of your comfort zone, shouting out in a public space like this, especially after Corona. Everybody's just used to being locked up somewhere and only talking to a screen or through a screen to other people. But can I please get my slides up? Oh. Good. Sorry about that. So I want to thank Teemu for inviting me here to give this rambling and long speech. And when I was trying to figure out what to talk about, I think the instructions were give real world and personal examples. So I basically took my LinkedIn profile and decided let's go through that chronologically. So maybe that's entertaining. And that takes maybe 45 minutes. If you're awake after it, we can take some questions. The topic I chose was the flexible leader, improvise, adapt, and overcome. Why would I pick something like that? I felt like there's so many topics that are already very well covered in books and presentations and past Leadership Day presentations as well. And I wanted to talk about something more like how I personally had to deal with situations that were beyond my comfort zone and that were not really part of the job description. And it's a bit of a surface touch of many things, but I hope there's a kind of a common theme there. So welcome to this presentation. My name is Lasse Seppänen. I'm a game lead at Supercell. Let's get rolling. So, when you start out as a leader in the games industry, you might be thinking that, hey, it's going to be like that, And this is how the books make it sound. It's neat and clear and like you know what you're doing. So this guy, Aragorn, he has a pretty clear job description. He's the heir to the throne of Gondor. He has a very clear task or project. He just needs to defeat all those orcs, plus Sauron, and then he's done. Project complete. He also has a team behind him, which he can rely on 100%. They're going to do all of his bidding. He is in a position of authority. And, what could go wrong? Well, does the game industry always work like that? What do you think? Who thinks it doesn't work always like that? Yeah, me too. I've not always, but often encountered it's maybe a little bit more like this, that you are kind of in this post-apocalyptic setting with no food and you've been struggling for days or weeks and you're actually down to your last bullet and you're trying to figure out a way out of your bad situation. And you don't necessarily know what you're doing. Maybe the guy has never fired a gun. He has only one bullet. Is he going to hit anything? So as a leader, you just have to make the best of the situation. You can't run away. If you run away, you let down everybody. You let down your company, your team, maybe even destroy your career, if people no longer trust you. You just have to keep going, even if that happens. So I took this improvise, adapt, and overcome. I borrowed it from US Marine Corps because it just felt like, sometimes the grind in the games industry, it's a bit like that. You come into situations, you improvise, you try to adapt yourself into new companies, new projects, new teams, and you overcome obstacles. It's a bit like this. That's an actual US Marine Corps obstacle course. And if you think about a typical project, there are many stages to it, and they can require different skills, different talents. Assembling a core team, very a typical thing. You talk to some people and you have common ideas, and maybe you set up a startup, or maybe you're a part of a bigger company and you set up around a new game idea that you all share passion for. And concepting, demoing, pre-pros, production, release, that's all game developer stuff, and you kind of know what you're doing. even though you might be also facing these for the first time as a leader. But the yellow ones, I've noticed, where you have to secure the money to do it, especially if you're not part of a bigger company. But even then, that's, I think, the number one thing, at least that I've had to face many, many times, that, it brings me out of my comfort zone. I would much rather just work on the game, work with the team, and not be doing this all the time. Like, okay, how do we get money? Or we're going to go bankrupt. And we're down to our last bullet, and we're going to shut down the company if we don't now sort of get the money. And I've noticed also that Supercell game leads, because there are many game leads, maybe a dozen of us. We're very different people. We have very different talents and capabilities. And some people even are like early stage game leads. So they might take it from core team to concept and get it down the road, maybe the first year or maybe first 18 months. But then, they are like, I don't want to, be leading anymore. It's getting too big, the team. I want to focus on the game. And then another guy or girl steps in and takes over. And it's quite like intriguing how this works for all of us, because we're all different. So for some of those obstacles are easy, and for some, they're difficult. But I wanted to jump back into my LinkedIn profile. So this is my 25th year in the games industry. Next spring, I will celebrate a quarter of a century. But 24 years ago, I got my first job. I was fresh out of school. I was an aspiring game designer from what's now known as the Aalto University. Back then, it was the University of Art and Design. And I just wanted to focus on the game, right? Story of many game developers. You want to focus on the game, not deal with the boring stuff. I was hired by a company called Whizbang, which was really lucky, because back then, jobs were super scarce. Now you people might be facing a job market with, 2,000 plus jobs here in Finland. Back then, it was probably like less than 100. And unless you were like super duper demo coder or something, it was extremely hard to find anything. But I was really lucky to find this company, and we made these amazing games that you can see here. And I have to also point out to the artists here in the crowd that those graphics are not grayscale. This is monochrome graphics, so the pixel is on or the pixel is off. You don't have any shades of gray there. But still, you gotta, live with the constraints. We were making games for text messages, WAP, which you can see on the right. We did some web, which was the fanciest thing we could do with Flash, like a little driving game. But then 1998, the internet bandwidth and the browsers and all that, it's super limited. So first thing you had to, of course, like adapt to what were the super tight constraints. Like, how do we even make a game into this when basically a text message has a limited amount of characters, no graphics and nothing, and you can make like a turn-based thing where the system tells you something, oh, a meteorite is coming your way. Do you want to avoid or shoot it or something? And then you make a choice and send it back. And of course, like I said, I wanted to focus on game design. I was young, I was naive, but this was a tiny, tiny company with very little money, so I had to adapt and take on more leadership responsibility, become a producer. And because our money was mostly coming from clients like teleoperators, TV channels, and so on, I had to learn to pitch and sell projects, and I hated that. It wasn't the fun part. I wanted to, stick to the office and stay there. And of course, on top of that, there was even another adaptation. We didn't have enough coders, so I had to code some of the games too. And I was not a great coder, which, then creates quite a lot of anxiety when you have to get the game done. But I think just wanted to bring this kind of up. I think many people in the industry, they kind of enter the industry having this idealistic view, and then they face the reality, especially at the start of the career in small companies. You just gotta do what you gotta do, or a startup environment. Okay, I'm gonna jump ahead. 2001, exciting time. We were, me and a few other people, we were kind of done with this super tight constraints of these platforms. And there was this incredibly powerful new thing in town. The Game Boy Advance. Imagine you can actually run software on it. And of course, Game Boy had existed before, but this was kind of a point where we were ready to leave the company, and this thing came along, and we just felt like we can make an amazing game on that device. It had great graphics, very nice screen, lots of processing power, even multiplayer, so that you could have a single person buy the game and then hook up several of these games and play from that single cartridge, which is quite interesting. So, but I didn't want to do the money thing, and I didn't want to necessarily do the project management thing, so I wanted to be a creative director and just stay to the creative, work on the game design, work with the team. And this is the game that we started on. It was a manga-style tactical sailship game. And we were so excited about this game. It was beautiful, in our minds at least. It was like running well. You could emulate at that time on PCs and so on. So development was relatively effortless. Okay. And I even got like another guy. I kind of talked him into agreeing to be the CEO. Well, he was in name the CEO, but then the reality was that I actually started to do a lot of the stuff he does. And yeah, that's a typical adaptation. So we encounter money again. One single development kit for Nintendo Game Boy Advance cost in 2001, as far as I can remember. It cost about $15,000. That's like an insane amount of money for people, coming out of not straight from school, but a couple of years of experience and no money in the company. So, okay, how do you improvise? Mail order from Hong Kong. You get some flashing equipment, you get some generic flashcards that actually fit the device, and you work with emulators, and we could actually run the game then on the device. That was so amazing, You can imagine the first time we got it running with this improvised setup. Hey, this thing actually works without Nintendo being involved in the loop. And that winter was an absolutely wonderful time because we were able to focus on the game, and we got it running. We were able to play, single player and so on. So we made a demo where you could like shoot and board other ships and so on. And we felt like we have a really good game at hand. We were playing, of course, the other Nintendo games, and much of the offering that was there wasn't like much to write home about. But obviously, once again, we need the money. Now we have a demo. We can't go forward without having salaries, and one guy was still working in his full-time job. If we really wanted to make this game, we needed to get him out of his job and pay salary to him as well. And we needed money. Okay, so me and the CEO, we went to this place, Los Angeles, E3. Never done it, never spoken with a game publisher in my life. This was quite the challenge, to be honest. So even though I was traveling with the CEO, it kind of turned out that I had been too idealistic about hey, this guy's just going to be the CEO and I can focus on the game. The reality was that I knew much more about the game industry. I knew much more about the game, and it ended up being more like he's helping, he's making the brochures and so on, and he's kind of tagging along and helping me, but I kind of had to do the whole thing and carry the responsibility, to be honest. And the main obstacle, now when we talk about improvising and how do how do we even get an appointment with somebody like Disney or EA or whoever, because we didn't have any appointments. We travel to E3. We don't have any appointments. How do we get there? Well, you gotta improvise. You gotta get out of your comfort zone. And we got this excellent tip from a fellow developer in Finland, like how to approach this problem. And I can tell you how it goes. So typically, if you go to E3, you have a booth, and you have a couple of gatekeepers there. And there would be typically maybe 2 people manning the booth, and behind them is the meetings area, where all the people are that we need to see. And you walk to the booth, and you're like, hey, we have this amazing Game Boy Advance game. Who do we need to talk to about it? And they're like, do you have an appointment? And here's the thing. You say, okay, I don't have an appointment. But here's the trick. Do you have any business cards for that person? And more often than not, they actually had under the counter, they had the business cards and they would give them. So that was trick number 1. That you didn't just go away and be like, okay, we don't get an appointment. You had to, get out of your comfort zone and keep at it. Be like a little bit like, like a terrier and don't let it go. Okay, you walk away with the business card. You do the same at a couple of other booths. A couple of hours later, you come back to the same booth and you check out, are they still the same people manning the booth? Because they work in shifts. So now they've rotated out of there, and what you do is now you take the business card, you memorize the name, put it away, you walk to the booth really confident, and you say, is John Smith here? I need to talk to him. And you'd be surprised how many times that works. They would check the schedule because they think you're somebody important, and you obviously have an ongoing conversation already because you know the guy and all that. And we got some appointments at E3. Yeah, it's funny. It works. But on the other hand, I'm a Finn. This wasn't easy. It takes a lot of like push to get out of that comfort zone, do this kind of social engineering. It wasn't really what I was raised to do. I was, raised to, be honest and straight and just like every other Finn here. But it was the only way. I knew we had a team in Finland. We had a game that would die. And you got to do what you got to do. Nobody got hurt. Nobody was forced into a deal, and so on. But we used this little trick that we got from somebody. Now, the problem when we had all these appointments, unfortunately, was that this was a really horrible business, which we only learned there. So just to give you an idea to the maybe more business-minded people here, if you wanted to manufacture one PlayStation 2 disc, that cost about $7 per unit. If you wanted to manufacture one Game Boy Advance cartridge, that cost about $14 per unit. And if you're a publisher, you have to pay that money before you sell the game. So if you would want to put, let's say, 10 million copies of the game in a store globally, you would have to, put 140 million into that before even are you going to sell any of that game. So it was a horrible, horrible business, and the reason for it was that Nintendo was the only handheld console at the time. PlayStation Portable came later. But at that time, they could just charge whatever they wanted, So because it was a horrible business, all the publishers focused on licensed IP. We didn't have licensed IP. We were bringing our own game with these manga characters. It's going to be awesome. And they would just grab anything they could get their hands on, like these wonderful, wonderful licenses we saw at E3 2002. E.T., what a nice game. I haven't actually played it, so maybe I'm not doing justice to it, but at least our game was prettier. But you can imagine, as a developer, you're kind of super disappointed that, okay, they're going with that just because of this silly money thing going on. And we were offered one deal, which was total $50,000. And let's remember, one development kit costs $15,000, so no, can't do that. It would mean working with no salaries, basically. Time to adapt and overcome this problem. And we had a plan B, fortunately, before we even started the whole company. We had been around already long enough to understand that, okay, if this fails, we need to have a really good working sample. So we used that demo and started going to different game companies and showed the game, and all of us got jobs. And we're still working in the games industry. Actually, the people who were working on this game are at Supercell and Metacore right now. Cool. All right, on with the rambling. 2003, I was done with this creative stuff. I became the head of studio at Sumea, which later became Digital Chocolate after the acquisition, and I kind of gave up on being on creative. Okay, if this is what I kind of end up doing it anyway all the time, let's just adapt and do that. And I was still talking with the teams about their ideas, and sometimes, hey, we need characters for this game, or that kind of like a super strategic, high-level stuff. But really, I was like distancing myself from that, and I was doing of course, regular stuff that head of studios would do. Like an example here would be, we had a lot of junior people in the company. Many people got their first job maybe in the games industry through Digital Chocolate. So we need to organize that so that the few seniors we had would be guiding the many juniors we had, and we came up with the matrix studio organization, all that. But that's not the interesting part for this presentation, because what are the things that I didn't expect is after the acquisition, we got into this intercontinental politics situation with the US office. And this was my first time working across 10 time zones with different national cultures, with different working cultures. And the example I wanted to give you is this. So I was sitting on this Wednesday evening calls with the US office, where we went through the status of games and where we are. And then suddenly they say, hey, by the way, we know you are secretly working on this game, and you have to stop working on that game now because it's not greenlit. We have a green light process, and you can't work on it. I'm, the super honest Finn who's like, we are not working on any game. I told you we're not, we stopped it to wait for your green light, and we're not working on it at all. And there was just this a really weird situation where there's this lack of visibility from their side, lack of communication, lack of trust, obviously. It's the only time in my career where somebody said, I'm secretly working on a game. What? Usually, developers tend to be proud of working on games, not like hiding them. Working on this here secretly. And actually, when we finally got the green light and made the game, it became one of the biggest games for Digital Chocolate, the Tower Blocks. But it was a situation as a leader that I had never encountered, and I tried to then adapt and travel to the US and create personal relationships and try to get rid of this a situation where they wouldn't understand or they wouldn't trust what we say and so on. Okay, anyway. 2005, I was kind of, I had been dreaming of working on a big game. I'm sure many developers, start out that way. Wouldn't be cool to work on a really big cinematic AAA thing. And 2005, that suddenly materialized, that opportunity. And I, of course, went for it. I'd always wanted to do that. Alan Wake. Spent a total of 6 years at Remedy Entertainment. And I started as a sort of more a producer type of person, and then became the executive producer who was on top of the whole production. And then at the later years, I was the chief operating officer there. And obviously, this was an Xbox 360 game, also on PC. Really glad to see it now on PlayStation as well. Back then, it was Microsoft exclusive because it was funded by Microsoft Game Studios. And this was first time I was working with writers on the game, which is maybe a little bit interesting anecdote that it wasn't just the game designers and the programmers and all that. There was also a very like central element in writing. As you know, maybe Alan Wake is very heavily like story driven, and there was this idea that it's like a TV series, episodes, and all that. And we actually ended up, well, adapting to that situation so that when we realized, me and Jay, who is sitting back there, who was the producer working with me, we realized that, okay, our lead writer is actually like one of the main definers of the schedule. Whatever is his schedule, that's going to be the whole project schedule in many ways. So we actually agreed that Jay is going to be like on a daily basis managing our lead writer's schedule. As you know, maybe not the most common thing to do, that you focus on one individual person on a team so much that you're kind of working their daily schedule. But it is, you know, as a leader, you do what you got to do. You got to have a clear idea. What are you trying to achieve? We're trying to get this game out as quickly as possible. So as an example of like, then even if it's not conventional, we got to do that. Okay. Another like personal obstacle that I faced, especially in the early years at Remedy, was I was the mobile guy. You know, I didn't have the AAA street credibility. So whenever I had an idea about anything, you know, like, hey, why don't we like organize like this or whatever, I kind of quite often encountered this, well, this is how we did it in Max Payne. And they're like, okay, but this is not Max Payne. We're a bigger team and a new platform and all the different kind of structure to the game and all that. But it ain't easy, you know, if you're coming to this kind of situation where you're perceived as not being, you know, savvy enough or knowledgeable enough about this particular type of game you're making. I don't feel, at least I couldn't find a shortcut. You had to just build up the trust little by little and try to work on the stuff that they would kind of trust you to work on and earn that trust from there, and then spread out to other things from there. Also, in terms of like improvisation, we had a lot of cooks in the kitchen. This was a game studio that originated from the demo scene, incredibly talented people, but we also had like a lot of people with very good and solid opinions, but there were many people, so many cooks in the kitchen, and the project was a bit stuck because of that, because these people were spread out in the team, and getting aligned was hard. So we actually like then ended up putting all the decision makers together. We cleared out an area in the office and just put all those people who are in leading positions together, which maybe not like always good idea, because you might want to have your environment art lead sit with your environment artists and so on. But in that particular situation, I feel like that was a really good improvisation that we did and got the project going forward again. Okay. And just on a personal level, as you know now, by now you know that my background was actually coming from game design and more like creative and wanting to define what the game is. I realized that there are so many creative decision makers in the company that in this particular environment, it is better that I focus and I don't like try to assert myself into any of those areas. Plus also I knew that they know much more about AAA than I do. Of course, having come from the mobile handheld space. But I made the personal adaptation that I decided, I actively decided that I'm going to focus on my own silo, project management, production. It's big enough. We were building like outsourcing from scratch for the whole company and so on. Alrighty, moving ahead. A couple of more examples. After 6 years at Remedy, the big game was done, and I felt like, okay, do I really want to work on another one, or do I want to do something else? And this was a time when there were also like many other people who were experienced in the industry and were setting up startups, and there was this startup pöhinä or buzz going around. So we also, with Teemu and a couple of other guys, founded a startup called Playraven. And by now I was like, okay, I've adapted to being the COO, at Remedy, and I've been the executive producer, whatever. I was okay. I'm just going to be the CEO. Let's not make this difficult. I'll carry the cross. I'll take the burden. Just you guys make awesome games. I'll carry this thing. And of course, we were working on the still existing platforms of App Store, Google Play, making free-to-play games. And our dream was to make games that would be in a blue ocean market, so create their own category. Like a Pokemon Go would be an example of a game that kind of created its own category. It doesn't have any strong competitors because it's the only one of its kind in many ways. Okay, I was a first-time CEO, first-time venture capital backed now. And this was a big challenge, of course. And one example that I wanted to bring up here, like how do you adapt? Okay, now I'm the CEO, how am I supposed to, am I just working in Excel or whatever? But actually this happened several times during this period, that you just had to be super quick to respond and rearrange. Like, can you fly over to this different country tomorrow to talk funding? And you can't really be like, no, I'm not going to come. It's, you got to go. Like there was this one investor who actually invited me to come to his home tomorrow. And he was, putting a lot of money in potentially, so I had to do that. He took me to his favorite restaurant for lunch while we were there. He showed me his home and all that. And he actually did invest. But this would be one example, like if you're running a startup and you're CEO and you're getting this big funding, then you need to do whatever they feel comfortable doing. So I spent a ton of time, travel, funding, legal, business development. I think the adaptation I made was really pick my battles and delegate and trust game leads. It was the only way to stay sane. And this is a funny story, because towards the end, it looked like we are like 99% certain to be acquired by this company that is very, that has just tons and tons of Russian-speaking people, including the top management. And I thought that, okay, having had all this experience from before, with Americans, having dealt with that problem and building trust and all that, I kind of thought, okay, maybe it would be a good idea before the acquisition that I kind of take a quick Russian course so I can at least say, cheers or whatever. And I took a 5-day intensive Russian course, and then the deal fell through. And we were not acquired by them. Well, at least I learned a few words there. But maybe I was taking this adaptation thing a bit too far there. But you got to try and push your limits to figure out. Okay. How this story ended was we were acquired by Rovio at the end of 2018. The whole team moved there and kept working together. And I took a different turn in my career, and we're coming to the last bit of this presentation. This has been a very curious journey for 3.5 years at Supercell. So I started in early 2019 as the game lead. I actually was in the announcement video for Everdale and all that. But I think the curious thing is really this, like if you take a traditional organization, this is how Supercell usually likes to think of it itself, that this is how most of the industry traditionally has worked in the past, that there's some kind of top figure or a top group that comes up with a strategy for the company, and then they kind of approve everything, and they have a plan, master plan, and everything has to fit into that. And then that is kind of executed on the lower levels and turns into games. So let's say we are making hyper-casual games. Let's set up teams that make hyper-casual games. And okay, you make a merge whatever, and you make a match 3 whatever, and so on. And I'm exaggerating a bit, but the exaggeration helps maybe a little bit to understand this idea that, hey, Supercell thought that, what if we turn this around Many of the founders at Supercell were developers themselves. They didn't feel like that's a working model. And the whole idea here is that the people who are closest to the game, they know best what to do with it. So if you have these people that are very far removed from the games themselves, their decisions are not going to be good for the games. They can be, but they have less understanding of the game, and they might be just driving somewhere because they see it in Excel, but they don't understand the reality, maybe. That was the idea, why this was turned around. And the whole idea is that all the teams are independent, almost like their own companies, or startups, or cells, like we call them. And these independent teams decide about almost everything, like what kind of game you're making. Supercell doesn't greenlight games. Supercell greenlights teams. If you want to set up a new team, then there is scrutiny, and they're asking like, okay, who's gonna wear what hat on the team, and why do you think this team would be like an amazing team? But once you have your team and you get to work, then maybe you work on one idea, you kill it, and then you work on another idea and you kill it, and then you come up with something that you actually do want to like take further, and then you take it all the way to beta, and then you ship it to beta, and you're still making all the decisions yourself. And only at the point where you would be wanting to go like fully global release with support all the countries and all the languages and everything in the world, that's where you have to get an approval. But by then, of course, hopefully you have proven that this game and this team really has what it takes. But of course, the interesting question is, okay, I came here 3.5 years ago, and I was looking at this, and I'm like, okay, so what exactly do I do? Because if the people who are closest to the game are making the decisions, what does that mean for me? Like, I'm supposed to be a game lead, and it's like this is fundamentally different. I haven't seen it anywhere else. Of course, the positive was that I didn't need to run around fundraising, doing biz dev and all that, so I could focus on the game, but what exactly am I supposed to do with the game and the people? And also I noticed that these people are super experienced. They're encouraged to go beyond their job description. Like, I've seen situations where the coder needs legal to make a decision, so it's just writing to the legal and they make a decision about the game that I'm leading, and then the project continues. So it raises very interesting questions like, okay, team decides, it is real, I've seen it, how does it actually work? I get this question a lot also from other people. So what is the game lead? In the beginning, like first few weeks, I was like trying to figure out like, am I supposed to be kind of the spokesperson for the team? So they just tell me what they decide and I'm kind of relaying it forward, and maybe I'm setting up the environment so that I make sure everybody has a desk and computer and whatever. And everybody feels good, and if they need a holiday, they can talk to me and whatever. Or is it more like a coordinator that, hey, actually, I've noticed you should be speaking to that guy at the other end of the room about this topic, and maybe I'm like, I know more, or am I a coach? So that I coach people that, maybe one coder is comfortable talking to legal and another one is not, so I'm coaching that person to, hey, you should really like perk up and go talk to legal. They're good people there. Fun conversations. Or is it like a startup CEO, which we started to talk about internally a bit later, that it's like the startup CEO, but without the fundraising part. So you can actually you have maybe a bit more authority there within the team. I think after 3.5 years, I can say the answer actually isn't a singular answer. It depends on your talents, the team you're working with, and the game. And people kind of adapt. This is really the place where you have to adapt, and you have to not be afraid of doing things that you might not have done before. Because if you just want a super clear thing, then you can't have all that freedom. It's really like the last line here. With great freedom comes great responsibility. You have a blank page and you have to fill it in yourself. You have to solve that uncertainty yourself. And the way I kind of adapted to this was working in a trio with a game designer who is very deeply in the game, and then a business lead who is actually taking care of all the projections for the game and like releasing me to work with the team and on a high level on the game. And I don't know if this makes sense, but that's how I've at least experienced it. And I gotta say, it's after all these years, this is the most amazing place to create new games that I have seen. Maybe there are others out there, but this is the one that I've seen. If you want to create a new game, this is the kind of environment where nobody is stopping you. Nobody is, putting these green lights in front of you or you needing to raise money and so on. But of course, it does come with the other side of the coin. I don't think it's a great environment for everybody. You might not want that much freedom and like a blank page in front of you. It might also be scary. Okay, last one, closing words. I know it's been a bit of a ramble going through these years and just scratching surface here and scratching surface there. But what I would really like to say to you, like, whatever your job title is, it's just the beginning. Every new team, every new company, every new role you take, it's a journey. You start from it, from the job title, but then you have to work your way, depending on many parameters. Like, what is your business environment? Are you low on money? What is your platform? Does it need a big team or a small team for this platform? What is the culture of the company? Is it very hierarchical and political and you gotta build these relationships within the company? Or is it, like Supercell is that you kind of have the power in the team, so you don't have to spend so much time just trying to build or work around the power structure. Are they juniors? Are they seniors? All of these things, they go into like defining how you need to act as a leader. So I would say, start from the job description, be prepared to improvise, adapt, and overcome. And the way I like to approach new situations these days is I start by having an open mind, listening, learning, observing, and trying to avoid asserting too much. There's so many like meetings where you feel like, oh, I really want to jump in and like drive this thing now towards this or that. But if it's a new team and a new game and everything, I try to force myself to take a step back and just listen and let them talk and hear them out and see how they think about the game and how they are used to working and all that. And after a bit of while, when you start to understand the system better, then you can start to also take active role there and here, because you understand what your impact is going to be in these various things. Thank you.
Thanks, Lasse. Amazing stuff. So now we're going to have the QA portion, and there will be a thing up here, a QR code. If you have any questions, feel free to use that with your favorite web browser, your phone, and type in your questions there. I will see them through magic on my iPad. And that same goes for everybody on the stream, obviously. But starting off, already I'm seeing some stuff come up here. Okay, let's start with this one. So history doesn't necessarily repeat, but it certainly rhymes. So do you find any of your leadership experiences or problems repeating?
Well, I think people are people. Even though times change, people are people, and there are things that repeat, like, for instance, interpersonal conflicts, that you have two people on the team, they just don't get along, and you have to solve it somehow. And hopefully you can solve it by bringing them together, first talking to them, both of them, and understanding what the problem is from their perspectives, and then figuring out how to bring them together to talk about it. But sometimes, of course, you have to then make changes to the team as well. That's one example. But of course, there's many other things that kind of rinse and repeat.
So people, essentially.
People would be one top example in my mind.
Yeah. What about I think through your story, the context has been wildly different over the years. The context of the business, the size of the teams, all that. Do you find that nowadays you have a different set of problems as back in the day, or is it really dominated? Is it about that people and team, regardless of the context?
Yeah, I think it's super different, of course, when you have been around the block and you know a lot of people and you have all the experience, so that you're not facing these things first time. You're only facing a couple of things that are first time, but most of the things are like business as usual. So it's very, very different from that perspective, and it also helps when people recognize that, okay, you know, you have experience, so I trust you to know what you're doing. Whereas in the beginning, of course, there were all kinds of situations where people might not trust, or they might think their idea, you know, is better, even though they might not be specialists in that area or whatnot. And especially the money raising, of course, has changed a lot. It's just very, very different context now working at Supercell, where I don't need to raise money.
Yeah, fair enough. And continuing with the people, here's a popular one. How have you dealt with motivational issues with people in the team?
Motivational issues with people in the team. I think it comes down to really talking to them. The way they're usually surfaced is maybe often, sometimes people bring it up themselves, but often it starts from other people talking about them. Like, hey, that guy isn't actually like doing much anymore, and you should really do something about it. And I think, well, people are people. You gotta go and talk to them. You can't solve it in an Excel. And try to find out, like, why are they not motivated? Are they just burned out? Seen it many times, that this is actually like a person who would be great and who might be motivated in the company if he or she just wasn't so burnt out. And then the solution would be, you know, hey, why don't we take a vacation, or like sick leave, actually, not a vacation, for a burnout, and think about things and come back after that. So that would be one example. But then, of course, the problem could be deeper. It could be like they have lost motivation and they want to work on something else. Like they don't like the game they're working on, or they might not like even the platform. Maybe they want to do more high definition stuff, realistic humans or something. And then it's really has to be an open conversation about, like, what do you really want to do? Can we even offer that?
Yeah. Sounds hard. So how do you learn this? Specifically, the question is, do you have leadership training at Supercell? But I guess more generally, how do you learn?
We do actually have leadership training. We just had feedback training just last week for all the leads. And it comes recurringly. But we try different things. The thing about Supercell is that we kind of celebrate trying out new things. And that's the way we keep the company fresh. So there will be a different feedback approach and a different educator coming, you know, this year, and maybe next year it's something else, and so on. So we try not to like fall into a mold where we just repeat and repeat and repeat and no new kind of ideas. We have to evolve with the time. I think that's the idea. How do you learn that, like, beyond the Supercell context? Well, it's tricky. I mean, I think some people are people persons, so that's of course a strength. If you happen to be a people person who is just super comfortable going and talking to people, all kinds of people, and learning about them, and is curious about what makes them tick, that obviously is a great foundation for you then to go and build relationships with them. And if you have a relationship with people on your team, it's much easier to also hear from them just by going to lunch with them. You might hear that I'm actually not feeling great about working in this team, and so on. But what if in the other scenario where this might not be your core area, maybe your core area, let's say you're a coder who became a CEO, and maybe that's not how you're built, that you're just all day long happy to talk to people. You would much rather maybe work on the game and do your duties as a CEO on a little bit more like formal level. And I don't think there's a shortcut necessarily, then you probably would need to hire somebody who would be, let's say, your operating person or your HR or somebody who is really good with people and can surface these things to you then and help you with them.
Fair enough. And how do you know when to stop trying? that an obstacle is not worth overcoming? How do you know when to quit?
Yeah, it's a tough one. How do you know when to quit? It depends. You know, if you love your game enough, you might go too far. You jeopardize your home, for instance. What if you take a big bank loan and bankroll the game with that, and you're going to lose your home if you don't make it with the game, if the game doesn't become a hit? That's the kind of risk that I personally have never taken. I've drawn the line there. That like jeopardizing the whole foundation of your personal life is something that when it starts to come close to that, let's say the Game Boy Advance deal where we would have worked with no salary until the game is done, and it's just, you have to draw the line there, in my opinion. And I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, like risk everything on one game.
Yeah.
But I know that people have done. I remember a story about Trip Hawkins, like when he was setting up after EA. He was the founder and CEO of EA, and he left EA and he founded this new company, 3DO, that had its own game console, and he wanted to make it like a creative platform. And it wasn't going well for the company, so for instance, he sold his private jet to keep the company going. So, I don't know if you can count that as jeopardizing the fundamentals of your private life, but maybe for him it was like a big
identity choice.
But just an example. I mean, if you have the loose cash, sure, why not? Sink it into your passion. But if it's jeopardizing your home and your family and your whole life, then stay away from it. Call it quits. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Maybe one more. There's a ton here, but I'll go with one I like. So you said to build trust slowly, step by step. How does one do that? And as a preemptive thing, the way we started building trust was that you bought me a gin and tonic at GDC in a Marriott lobby. That works. Highly recommend it. Anything else?
Well, I think that's a good point. Like, building trust happens if you know the person as a person, not just the work. Then that creates a lot of trust. That that hey, Teemu is actually a good guy. So that helps in building trust. And if you share a drink or lunch or whatever, that's a good way to learn about what makes other people tick and how they feel. But then actions speak louder than words. If you're trusted to do this thing and you're not maybe trusted to do that other thing, well, why don't you just start doing these things really trustworthy, in a really trustworthy fashion, so that they know that whenever you promise something, you deliver, maybe you even over-deliver, you're on time, you don't waste anybody's time, and so on. And you build the trust that, hey, I know what I'm doing in this area, and you kind of establish your role in the team, and then you're able to expand from there into other areas. That's at least how I've seen it.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Lasse, for taking the time. I know you're a very, very, very busy man, so fantastic to have you here. Everyone, Lasse.
Thank you.